They left her under the blazing sun, the sand burning hot enough to blister through her boots. The engine roar of the departing trucks faded into silence, leaving only the hiss of wind and the dull hum of heat. Her name was Captain Mara Lorne, Delta Force, callsign, Spectre. The men who abandoned her thought she wouldn't survive an hour. They were wrong. Her mission had gone sideways 3 days earlier near the border of Turin, a lawless strip of desert where warlords traded hostages for guns and oil. Delta was sent to extract a kidnapped diplomat, but an ambush splintered the team. Communications were jammed, the Black Hawk forced to retreat, and Mara, leading the recon element, was cut off with minimal gear and a single rifle. The ones who found her weren't rescuers. They were mercenaries, locals paid by the same syndicate Delta had come to dismantle. They took her weapon, stripped her of her gear, and drove her 40 miles into the dunes before tossing her from the truck like refuse. One of them had grinned, kicking dust into her face. "Delta dies here, American," he said. Mara looked up, squinting against the sun. Her lips cracked. "You'd better pray I do." Hours passed. The horizon swam in heat. Her canteen was gone, but she had learned long ago that panic wastes energy faster than thirst kills. She crawled toward the shadow of a dune, digging into the sand to find cooler layers beneath. When night fell, the desert turned cold and cruel. She shivered under the stars, every muscle aching, every breath a reminder she was still alive. She thought of her team, Reyes, the medic with too many jokes, Carter, her second in command who never trusted an easy mission. They would have been looking for her if they could. But the syndicate had their own trackers, and the odds of a rescue were near zero. By dawn, she had found her rhythm again. Delta taught survival not as a checklist but as instinct. She pulled apart the lining of her vest, still around her shoulders, and used the fabric to filter condensation from the morning air. A few ounces of moisture gathered, enough to keep her lips from splitting. She followed the wind's pattern, knowing it carved lines toward the dry riverbeds where scavengers might roam. Where there were scavengers, there might be water, or men. By the third day, she saw smoke. It rose faintly over a ridge, the color of burning diesel. She moved low, conserving strength, using the dunes for cover. Through the heat haze, she spotted a small encampment, 5 tents, 2 vehicles, and a satellite dish. Mercenaries again. The same ones who had left her to die. Her pulse slowed, not from fear but from focus. Delta didn't fear death. They studied it, rehearsed it, planned for it. And when it came close, they made sure it regretted showing up. That night she waited for the moon to fall low. The camp's sentries were careless, laughing near the fire, their rifles slung loosely. She crept behind the wrecked truck, found a rusted crowbar in the sand, and used it to pry off a length of steel, sharp enough to serve as a blade. Then she moved. The first guard never heard her. A soft twist, a choke, the sound of sand shifting beneath boots. She caught his rifle before it fell, checking the chamber by touch. Loaded. Suppressed. Perfect. The second went down before he could raise an alarm. She dragged the bodies into the shadows and moved toward the largest tent. Inside were maps, communication gear, and a blinking console tied to a satellite uplink. A file name caught her eye, Project Ashwind. She copied the coordinates scribbled beside it, an outpost 2 clicks east. Her team was alive, or at least part of it was. She'd packed a small rucksack with rations, ammo, and a medical kit before setting a charge from a stolen grenade. Under the comm unit. As she walked away, the camp lit up behind her, a blossom of orange flame tearing through the night. By sunrise, she was already near the outpost. The terrain turned rocky, carved by dry canyons. She moved along the ridge, spotting 3 vehicles parked outside a concrete structure half buried in sand. Guards patrolled lazily. She counted 8, maybe 9. Inside, she could hear faint voices through a cracked radio feed, one of them, unmistakably, Reyes. Her throat tightened. He was alive. She waited until a guard stepped away from the main entrance, then used his absence to slip through the shadows. Inside smelled of diesel and blood. Reyes was tied to a chair, bruised but breathing. When he saw her silhouette in the doorway, his mouth fell open in disbelief. "Spectre," he whispered. She cut him loose. "Quiet. We're not ghosts yet." He coughed, flexing his wrists. "Thought you were gone. They left me to die," she said, checking the corners. They were wrong. Together, they moved toward the exit. But a guard turned the corner too early, eyes widening. The silence shattered. Bullets ripped through the air, hitting the concrete walls in sparks. Mara Dove fired twice, and the man crumpled. More shouts followed. Reyes grabbed a fallen rifle. "What's the plan?" "Same as always," she said, reloading. "Survive first. Talk later." They fought their way out through the narrow corridors, flanking and covering each other like muscle memory. The sun outside was blinding, the heat brutal, but adrenaline burned through exhaustion. A truck roared to life, one of the mercs trying to flee. Mara sprinted, jumped onto the side rail, and yanked the driver out by his collar. She threw him into the sand, slammed the vehicle into gear, and gunned it toward the horizon. Behind them, the outpost erupted in a storm of gunfire. Reyes leaned out the window, returning fire. "Command's gonna want to know how the hell you're still breathing." She cracked a dry smile. "Tell them Delta doesn't fear death. It's the other way around." They drove for hours, using the rising heat shimmer to stay hidden from drones. By afternoon, the radio crackled to life, a coded Delta frequency, faint but real. "This is Ironwatch. Repeat, this is Ironwatch. Do you copy?" Mara grabbed the mic. "Spectre and Ghost, alive and mobile. Requesting extraction." Static buzzed, then a voice replied, almost incredulous. "Captain Lorne, we thought." "Don't finish that sentence," she said. "Just bring the bird." The Black Hawk came at dusk, its shadow sweeping across the dunes. As the rotors beat the air, Mara looked back toward the distant plume of smoke curling on the horizon. The camp, the outpost, the men who had thought her story was over. When the rescue team touched down, Carter stepped off first, his eyes wide. "You look like hell." "Hell looks worse," she said, climbing aboard. As the helicopter lifted, the desert stretched below them, endless, golden, silent. But to Mara, it wasn't emptiness. It was proof. Proof that death had come close, circled, and retreated. Because some warriors didn't fight to live, they lived to fight until even death learned to keep its distance. Later, back at base, debrief officers filled the room with questions, none of which mattered. She gave them coordinates, enemy counts, and intel from the Ashwin files. When they asked how she survived 40 miles of desert alone, she just shrugged. "Training," she said. "And a promise." "What promise?" one officer asked. Mara looked at the map on the wall, where red lines traced the syndicate's routes through the desert. "That if they left me breathing, I'd make sure none of them walked out again." Outside, the night was calm. But somewhere beyond that horizon, the wind still carried her name, Spectre, the Delta who didn't fear death.